Alright, going on, my friends. Yeah, it's a bit awkward. I'm sitting here in the truck, of course. Once again, I'm sitting in the parking lot outside the Hampton Inn, the great city of Mason City, Iowa. I just did a grease interceptor behind me, Caribou Coffee. It's just next to the drive-thru. So I sit there watching the people watching me getting their I'm watching them get their coffee, and they're staring at me like, "Why are you stinking up the neighborhood, boy? Why are you stinking up the night?" Anyway, epic level play. Epic level play is obviously kind of what it sounds like. It's not for the new and not for the faint-hearted. It's also not for the lazy. As I point out, 50 years, that's 5 decades of playing Dungeons and Dragons specifically, but 5 decades, I have played at campaigns and I have ran campaigns that very basic. Most people didn't get over 3rd or 4th level. And I've had ones where we were in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. We were playing God level epic crap. And there's challenges to that. A lot of it. More than what you think. One of the problems we run into at these higher level campaigns for epic level, combat gets boring as F. No offense, can get very complicated and convoluted too. When you figure in all the extra moves and specialty things and feats and your prestige class bonuses and now epic level stuff, you can do some pretty miraculous things that you would see in TV movies and stuff and go, ooh, I want to do that. And you don't really understand just how good that character in the movie has to be. Legolas the archer is hard to surpass. Legolas the fighter for humans are hard to surpass. In part because he's that damn good. He would be a prestige class character, maybe even borderline epic level character based on his position, not on his experience. You know, there's some different caveats that go into play when we're talking Lord of the Rings here, but the concept's the same. So when you want to run an epic level game, one of the things you need to have is you need to have a serious group of players. You need a serious group of players. If you have a group of players that are really leaning into the 4th dimension of play in the theater of the mind, epic level is right up your alley now. It really is, because epic level, if you look at it, well, let's just look at spells, for example. Spells cap out at 9th level. There are no 10th level and 15th level spells. There's no official ones. I mean, there's some leaning around that people go wink and nod, and there's a couple little obscure doohickeys, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are 15th level spells now. You know, who the hell knows? I haven't kept up on the updated D&D 5th edition crap, let alone this new stuff that's coming out. I'm not going to plan on it. So, if there is, all right, I'm wrong. But for the most part, when it comes to epic level spells, so if you're a 22nd level wizard, and you want to get even more powerful, what you start doing is you start creating your own spells, following the very complex spell creation rules for epic level play. That's a lot of work for a player to do, and most of that's going to be that player's going to do that homework off the table. And you have to maintain it, do it on a regular basis. The other part of it is when you talk about epic level wizardry, epic level magic, for example, a lot of what you're seeing is just doctored up or powered up versions of lower class spells, or you become very savvy as a player who plays magic users or spellcasters, and specifically, but magic users or spellcasters in general, magic users specifically. Get it there eventually. Is that you have to modify your lower level spells and be creative about doing it, and they give you all the mechanics starting at prestige class. When you start getting into above the 10th level, you start getting access to feats and other knowledge that gives your character the ability to dial up spells, increase their damage, increase their range, increase their potency at a cost. Now when you get to that epic level, now we can take that same philosophy and put it on steroids, right? This is where you have to, as a player, you really have to be on your game. And check it out, players, epic level is on your shoulders. You cannot lay down all that work on your GM's shoulders and expect them to carry the day. It's not going to happen. You can't sustain that on a regular damn basis. You have to be committed to your epic level play. Which goes back to full circle to what I first started out when I said combat. Well, combat in epic level is epic. Well, duh. But you have epic level monsters, you have all this other stuff. We got these things that are designed to challenge a freaking god and God's avatar, for God's sake. This is what you're dealing with. So what happens to all the other rank and file of monsters that came before? There's where the creation rules and the modification rules allow you to prestige them up, to epic them up. No? You want to see some players crap themselves at your table, drop some epic level kobolds or epic level goblins, and when that little 1.5 foot tall lizard thing tears your leg off and starts to beat you senseless with it, and you're going, it's just a kobold, you know you're playing epic now. No, right? Truth is epic level play is more geared toward the cerebral play. What I mean by that is, first level, early level, combat is everything. You in combat on a regular basis all the time, because that's mostly what you got to work with. You know, it's not till you start getting into prestige classes when your character level starts ecking up above 8th level. Start getting above 8th level. And then if you got the right kind of players and the right kind of game master, you start looking at the table from a different view. Your characters are now in it for the long haul. What I mean by that is a lot of players sit down and create characters with the idea that they're only going to run this character in this campaign for, I don't know, X amount of sessions or X amount of months. You know, there are some videos on YouTube that talks about people who've been playing the same characters or the same world setting, the same players for 40 years. My friends and I were still hooked up and hanging out. We'd be running something like that. Although I don't think we would have one unbroken, sustained damn campaign, because that's epic itself, right? Awesome stuff, guys. You got that? Oh, you're on point, man. You're on point, in charge. Now, so we talk about getting away from combat. The higher the character's levels go, the less combat you really should be involved in. What? No, but that's not what we do. Read the books. Read the source books. Read all the extras crunch books that came out for 3.5, and then there's been some that have been reprinted for 4.0 and for 5.0, and they don't have as much crunch, but they still cover a lot of these areas. You're talking about your characters becoming involved in a protection racket, the local guilds, the local politics, land ownership. Think about that for a minute. All your early level characters, starting with basic through expert into advanced D&D, what do we get? An evolution of advancement to a point where it's written in the rules, in the initial basic rules, and in the expert rules, and in first edition rules, and in some variation every edition of D&D that's came after that, and in most of your fantasy tabletop role-playing games out there, carry some kind of caveat in there somewhere revolving about this. At some point, combat gets replaced with what? Other play. There's a lot of players that don't want to do that because it's just simpler and easier to sit there and toss dice and keep track of, and keep, resource management's what you're doing. You're playing a combat game and you're keeping track of your logistics and your supply, and your including your hit points and so on and so forth. That's all part of your lifeblood. That's supply. So, you have a lot of demand for your lifeblood and your supply is limited. So and when we get into these upper levels, we talk about the fighter, for example. What is it? 7th level, 8th level, somewhere in there. I know by the time you get to 10th level, you qualify for your own holdfast, your own keep. And there's some splat books that kind of carry you through that and help you expand on that. There are some that do that. I think I've reviewed a few. Then, for the most part, though, a lot of players take that as a meaning to, I'm going to go off into an adventure and have my adventure and then come back, on my downtime to keep track of my wizard's tower or my temple or my keep, right? And that's fine. But you keep advancing your character. At some point, running that keep should go to a new level. So you should have negotiations and discussions, not necessarily good ones, with neighboring landholders, or if you're a part of a kingdom, the nobility that you answer to. With the idea eventually working yourself somehow or another up into that nobility, right? Something a lot of new people don't consider and think about. So when we talk about epic play, there's just lots of opportunities. I just find it interesting that there's not a whole lot of YouTube content, a whole lot of video content of people going into great depth of breaking that down and helping players to really experience epic level play. Full circle again. Earlier in the video, I made a comment that said most people tap out at some point. And I find the average person, the average player, once they start getting up past level 12, 15, definitely level 12, start to lose their interest in the max amount of paperwork and expectations put on their shoulders to run their character at an epic level. This is why you see so many tables at some point reach a satisfactory conclusion, or not. Joe's character's dead. Let's start all over again. Whole new campaign, whole new characters. Been there, done that. More times than I want to count. Especially as the GM. Players just, okay, well, I don't want to introduce Joe to introduce yet another character, so let's just kill everybody off, or we all just dissipated or whatever, and let's start a new campaign. Which then means that for all intents and purposes, the rest of that session becomes session 0 for the next one and for creating characters for the next game. While you're scrambling as the GM to figure out what the hell you're going to do next. Because you had a whole big sandbox and a whole epic thing set out, and now it's just, right? So maybe you can repurpose some of it. Maybe you can repurpose all of it. I mean, some people are capable of doing it. But we tend to play down that stuff. So I find that most players, experienced players, seem to find that sweet spot between 3rd level and 8th level. And once they start getting into that, approaching the 10th level stuff, they start to either ignore all the options that's available to them, just keep focusing on the basics that make their basic character even more lethal than they are, or they start thinking about a new campaign. One out of 5, maybe 1 out of 10 players will sit down and go, well, how can we explain to the king that Baron Yahoo over there, who adjacent to our little holdfast, is the one that did blah 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 blah. Yeah, see, we get into a lot more cerebral play at the epic levels, and prestige classes introduce us to this. It takes a talented GM to negotiate that changeover, and it takes some dedicated players to continue with negotiating that takeover, in my opinion, right? Anyway, there's another video. Till next time, I'm me, you're you. I ain't got no cats in the truck, right?